The re-establishment of the hydraulic civilization that was built by our great ancestors was bestowed on the Irrigation Department. The department commenced its work on the 15th of May 1900, having its secretariat in Trincomalee. It continued the restoration work that had been launched by the Central Irrigation Board. Restoration work on Kala Weber that was built across the Kala Oya. Minneria, the great work of King Mahasen. Nachaduwa, adjoining the city of Anuradhapura, the Giant's tank in Manna, and the Vakanari tank in Batiklo were completed by the Irrigation Department. The first new tank that the Irrigation Department did add to the irrigation network of Sri Lanka is Iranamadu. It took 23 years for the department to complete this work, which began in 1902 and gave the country 21,000 acres of cultivable paddy land. During this period, both Kirindi Oya and the Wallaway Basin were also developed. Liangastora Anikat in the Hambantota district is one such development work. During the same period, development was undertaken in the Dadaroya River Basin. Ridipandi Ella and the Batalogora scheme are part of that. By 1920, the government's attention was directed at settling people in the dry zone to relieve the population pressure in the wet zone. With this, the department stepped into a new era. During this period, colonization schemes were undertaken by the department to settle people by the thousands in the dry zone. Today, we have 110 such settlement schemes throughout the island. Of these, the first established was Minneria. The department developed and gifted 12,000 acres of land to the settlers of Minneria. The Sea of Parakrama that combined three major tanks, Topawewa, Eramuduwewa and Dimbutuluwewa, are also restored. This giant project was able to bring 25,000 acres of paddy land back to life. The Elahara Minneria Yoda Ella that brings precious Mahavali water to the Polonnarva fields was also restored. The Elahara Anikat and Diabeduma bifurcation are two important structures in this giant canal. One arm of the Diabeduma bifurcation takes water to Minneria, Kaudulla and Kantare schemes, while the other directs water to Giritale. The development work at Minipe was also begun. The Minipe Anikat, built across the Mahavali, fed 15,000 acres of paddy land. Medium-sized schemes like Batmedilla in the Badula district was also developed in the hill country. Lands were developed in all of these schemes and given to the people who moved from various parts of the country as settlers. For this purpose, a separate unit was established in the department. Subsequently, it became a separate department called the Land Development Department. The Flood Control Act of 1919 entrusted the Irrigation Department with the power for effecting measures in flood control. In 1923, the department entered into this new era of flood control by launching the Colombo Flood Protection Scheme. The frequent threat of inundation of the city of Colombo by the rising water level in the Caledonia River was minimized to a great extent by this project. Later, flood protection schemes were adopted outside Colombo, including Gaul and Matra. The flood waters in the river was prevented from entering low-lying areas by constructing bunds on either side of the river, and the water collected outside the bunds were pumped into the river using pump houses at selected locations. The intrusion of seawater in the rivers affected the yield levels of paddy land and also the quality of the water. To prevent this, saltwater exclusion schemes were also built. Today, there are 110 drainage, flood protection and saltwater exclusion schemes in the country. In 1914, the department took another step forward by commencing training of field staff. Today, the department has a training institute located at Galgamur, which could conduct several residential programs simultaneously. "90% of the present technician-level staff are the product of this training institute. The institute also provides training to other government organizations and statutory boards on request. Conducting research and testing in various fields of civil and hydraulic engineering and material science was another step forward. The first such unit formed was the Hydraulic Research Laboratory in 1938. All the major schemes constructed by the department, such as Kirindi Oya, were modeled and tested here. The shape of hydraulic structures, such as the spill and sluice of a tank, is decided here in the laboratory after various tests. The models of all water resources development projects, including those of the Maha Valley, was constructed and tested in this laboratory. Victoria, the highest dam in Sri Lanka, is one such. The Kotmale scheme, which consisted of a complex tunnel system and an underground powerhouse, was also constructed after the tests done here. Among these is Polgolla, which was the first project completed under the Maha Valley program. first rock-filled dam in Sri Lanka, Randanigala, was another. Ranthambe, which is situated downstream from Randanigala, was also tested here. A model of the Upper Kotmale project, which is scheduled to be constructed in the future, has also been tested here. The river flow section, which was later named Hydrology Division, was also established in the late 1930s. It is necessary to assess the flow in a river, how the flow varies seasonally and also in the long run before a water resource project in a river basin could commence. This laboratory supplies river flow and other hydrometric data not only for irrigation schemes but also for all other water resources development projects. This lab maintains a number of field units for meteorological measurement. In the number of meteorological stations, it is only second to the Meteorological Department. By now, it has 20 rainfall measuring stations, 60 river flow measuring stations, and 6 evaporation stations. A soil lab was established in 1948. This was first established to assist the massive construction project of the Galloya scheme. This later evolved to become a full-fledged engineering materials laboratory. Later, it started conducting foundation investigation and carried out quality control testing for construction. This lab also provides services for private sector builders, including the quality control of concrete work. The engineering geology section was established in the late 40s. This section conducts foundation investigations for large structures. It can study foundations as deep as 300 meters. In addition, it provides drilling services for rock excavations. It was in 1932 that the post of irrigation engineer was first opened to Ceylonese. This transition took place along with the changes effected by the Donoughmore Commission to utilize local expertise, and by 1952, the Irrigation Department was completely managed by Sri Lankans. Heavy machinery was first introduced into Sri Lanka for building the dam of the Sea of Parakrama. This was considered a major step in the construction industry here. A machinery unit was established to service and manage this heavy machinery. Part of this unit was later developed to become the Machinery and Equipment Department. By 1940, restoration work on the Ridibandi Ella, Minneria and the Sea of Parakrama had been completed. Restoration work on Minipe, Kandalama, Padaviya, Alle and Kantale were being done. Restoration of minor schemes was also undertaken. With independence, the department entered into yet another era. Restoration work diminished while construction of new schemes became the major focus. Work on the biggest irrigation reservoir in Sri Lanka and also the first ever multi-purpose project, the Senanayaka Samudra, commenced. Work on the Rajanganir tank, irrigating 15,000 acres of land, and Nalanda, the first concrete dam in Sri Lanka, marked the beginning of this new era. The Sea of Senanayaka stands out among the new developments. Under this, 110,000 acres of paddy land were developed and handed over to the people. To launch this scheme, a separate statutory board called the Galloway Development Board was created, largely with the officers seconded from the department. The construction of Udawalwe and Chandrikawawa schemes, which were planned and designed by the department, was also handed over to the same organization, renamed by then as the River Valleys Development Board. The devastating floods of 1957 was a massive challenge to the department. 58 major tanks and 1,300 minor tanks were damaged. The department successfully met the challenge by restoring 27 major tanks and a large number of minor tanks within 1 year. To assess the suitability of soils for agriculture in prospective irrigation schemes, the Land Use Division was formed in 1959. Later, it undertook general soil classification work as well. It is this Land Use Division that had prepared the soil map of Sri Lanka. When the Mahavali program began, the Land Use Division was entrusted with preparing a detailed soil classification map for the Mahavali area in order to identify fertile soils suitable for different crops. By 1960, all the branches that were scattered over Colombo were brought into the newly built secretariat at Javatta. During the early 60s, the department was able to add approximately 12,000 acres of new paddy lands. 40% of the government revenue was spent on irrigation and land development during that period. The department, having conquered the domains of irrigation and flood protection, stepped into the realm of the reclamation of land. 13,200 acres of low-lying area in Colombo was reclaimed by the department. The unit that was established within the department for this purpose was later converted to an independent institute and later became the Land Reclamation and Drainage Cooperation. In 1964, the department was entrusted the work of developing groundwater resources. This section was later developed into an independent institution now functioning as the Water Resources Board. And the department had to shoulder the responsibility of taming the biggest river in Sri Lanka, the Mahavali. Initial planning and design of the Mahavali multipurpose scheme was carried out within the department. Later, this work was handed over to the Mahavali Engineering and Construction Agency, which was initially formed with the majority of officers seconded from the department. By 1962, the department had to undertake coastal protection and conservation work. Later, a new institute called the Department of Coast Conservation was formed, and this work was handed over to them. The Irrigation Department, along with the Agricultural Department, also started experiments to assess the irrigation water requirements for high-yield varieties that was introduced by the Green Revolution in the 1960s. The department also continued to assist the institutions that were created within the department and later developed as independent institutions by providing various consultancy services even after the 1970s. During this period, simultaneously with the Mahavali development work, the construction of the Inganimiti Reservoir in an area considered as underdeveloped in the Puttalam district, and also the construction of Lunugambera Reservoir in similarly backward areas of the Hambantota district were carried out by the department. There was a resurgence of activity in those extremely dry areas as a result of these irrigation schemes. Along with irrigation, settlements and infrastructure were also developed. Providing lift irrigation to cultivate lands above the laid canals was another step forward. 12 such schemes have been developed by the department. The irrigation schemes deteriorate with time. have to be renovated periodically. It is the responsibility of the department to undertake renovation of such schemes. The major schemes in Ampara, Anuradhapura and Polonnaruwa were renovated first. Some of the schemes were even modified while rebuilding. Under the Village Irrigation Rehabilitation Project and the National Irrigation Rehabilitation Project, minor and medium-sized tanks were also renovated. The Neelabamma scheme, that was specially meant for growing crops on a commercial basis, was a recent scheme the department has completed. The Mauara scheme, that is being constructed in the southern part of Sri Lanka, is another giant step taken by the department. Under this scheme, approximately 4,000 acres of farmlands will be developed. The construction is progressing at a rapid pace, bringing new hope for the water-deprived Ruhuna. Engaging in planning, designing, constructing, operating, maintaining and conducting research in the water resources sector for 100 years, the Irrigation Department has acquired immense skills, competence and institutional strength. In stepping into the 21st century, coordinating the efforts of water resources development and management will also become its responsibility. To maintain, conserve and protect the massive irrigation network built by the department will also be a huge responsibility. In performing these tasks, the Irrigation Department will have to consider together the aspiration of people and farmers and the long-term objectives of the country. In association with the large network of farmer organizations, there is a long way the department needs to go.
සභාවෙන් අවසරයි මහසින් ගොවි සංවිධානයේ බලප්‍රදේශය තුළ
It has to introduce new technology to preserve water and increase the application efficiencies to cater for increasing demand. It needs to be aware of global climatic weather changes and build its capacity to predict rain and drought in order to manage water resources optimally. Arresting the deterioration of water quality due to various reasons is another challenge. The Irrigation Department is now ready to face these new challenges.